I personally feel like grasses are some of the cooler plants out there in the world, partially because they are not just responsible for allergies. Grasses oftentimes are uniquely developed for a little bit of ground compaction, and also they allow for a little bit of foot traffic without getting overly upset. That's the big reason why they're the major plant that has dominated a lot of human and American in particular landscapes. We see them in soccer fields and backyards and front yards, and obviously interspersed with gardens. And we do that on purpose because it's one of the few plants that can handle being stepped on, and also the immense amount of soil compaction that happens because of that. In order to keep lawns looking good and weed-free, that's unfortunately really, really difficult. It requires a lot of chemical, pesticide, fertilizer input in order to maintain that, not even speaking about the amount of manpower it takes to maintain an army crew cut or the amount of water that you need to keep them happy. From there, I think that we can really look at how do you maintain healthy landscapes? How do you encourage drought and water adaptability? Many grasses are things like bluegrasses and fescues that unfortunately don't do well in some climes. Colorado is a fantastic example of that. I think that with the arid conditions, the lack of humidity, a grass that's native to Kentucky might not do well in those landscapes without a significant amount of input. I think the same can be said about Pacific Northwest gardens, that some grasses really can't deal with the almost excessive amounts of water during some parts of the year, and then simultaneously really intense droughts during other parts of the year. I think it's hard for plants to do that. And so if you can pick one that has naturalized or is native to your area, that usually helps cut down on the amount of money you're spending on your garden, and also on the amount of time, whether that's you putting in that work or your landscaper. So eventually, when you get to a place where you have identified your weed and you've decided that it cannot be tolerated and that it needs to go, we have a couple of products that are safe for organic use. Bonide Burnout is a product that I like to recommend a lot, partially because it doesn't smell awful. This is primarily a citric acid and clove oil product. This is the most effective when temperatures are high. This needs to dry on the leaves. This also needs to be able to sit there without rinsing off. Also, I recommend personal protective equipment anytime that you're applying pesticides or herbicides, not necessarily because they're unsafe, but that your hands are your vehicle to interact with the outside world, and you don't want to damage your hands just in case you are working with something that's caustic. So this is primarily a foliar application, and you're basically just going to spray that nice and evenly on the leaf of the plant you don't want. This is working to interrupt some of the nutrition pathways and essentially shrivel up the plant. You'll see this start working within an hour. Most of our broad and herbaceous weeds are very easily controlled with something like this. However, sometimes for your more extensive and root-based weeds, things like quack grass, for instance, those can oftentimes need multiple applications or perhaps a multifaceted approach to their control. Something to understand about herbicides, however, is that usually if an herbicide will kill one plant, it will also likely kill a plant that you actually want. As a consumer, we are required by law to follow the application instructions of these materials. I think some estimates can place that the home gardener will overuse pesticides and herbicides to the point where they're using 300% of recommended value on a regular basis.